Namaste, aloha, welcome to the Bhagavad Gita class as it is. We will be reading in chapter 13 today. Please accept my respects, everyone. Please accept my respectful obeisances, Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We will start off with some hearing and chanting of Krishna's holy names, so please join along. Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I was born in the darkness, ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So we are continuing in chapter 13. Entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. We've been reading about so many different things that Arjuna asks about in this chapter. One more detail about the Prakriti, material nature, Purusha, the controller, or the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and the knowledge and the end of knowledge. And Krishna pretty much lets Arjuna know that he is the knower of all bodies, that there is the individual living entity who is the knower of the field of activities. And we talked about the 24 elements of, the 5 gross elements, and the mind and the intelligence and the false ego and other things that were in the previous verse. And now we are at text 8 through 12. It's a very long, a lot of verses here, a lot of Sanskrit. Amanitvam adambitavam ahimsa kashantir arjavam acharyo pashanam sacham stairyam atma vinigraha indri arteshu vairagyam anankara evacha janma mritu jara vyadi dukkha doshanu darshanam ashaktir anbishvangaha putra dara gridishu nichacha samavchitavlam ishtanishto papatishtu tishu Mai chanava yogena bahir avya bichalini vivikta de desha shavichavam ahartir jana samsari adhyamaschakana nichadvam tattva ganartha darshanam etajtanam iti prakaram ajanam yadato natha. Go with the transliteration or English translation. Amandivam, humility. Adam vitam, pridelessness. Ahimsa, nonviolence. Kashanti, tolerance. Ajavam, simplicity. Acharya, upashanam, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Saucham, cleanliness. Stairyam, steadfastness. Atma vinigraha, control. Indriya arteshu, in the matter of the senses. Vairagyam, renunciation. Ahankara, anahankara, being without false egoism. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Janma, birth. Mrityu, death. Jara, old age. Vyadi, disease. Dukkha, distress. Dosha, fault. Anu, darshanam, observing. Ashakti, without attachment. Ana vivishvangaha, without association. Putra, son. Dara, wife. Gridishu, home, etc. Nichalam, eternal. Cha, also. Sama chitavam, equilibrium. Ishta, desirable. Anishta, undesirable. Upapatishu, having obtained. Mai, unto me. Cha, also. Anya yogena, by devotional service. Bhakti, devotion. Avya bichalini, constant, unalloyed. Viviktya, solitary. Desha, place. Sevitvam, aspiring. Arati, without attachment. Jana, people in general. Samsadi, mass. adhyatma, pertaining to the self, gnana, knowledge, Nityatvam, eternity, tattva gnana, knowledge of the truth, artha, the object, darshanam, philosophy, etat, all this, gnanam, knowledge, iti, thus, proktam, declared, agananam, ignorance, yat, that which, ata, from this, anyata, others. Okay, so text 8 through 12. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, and self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, non-attachment to children, wife, home, and the rest, and even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, resorting to solitary places, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I thus declare to be knowledge, and what is contrary to these is ignorance. So a lot there. Let's just read through what Bhaktivedanta has talked about here, with all these things that he's referred to as knowledge, and everything outside of it is ignorance. Purport: this process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. Okay, so that's very interesting. So this process of knowledge is thought of as some kind of activity that's done within the material field. But actually, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the tenfold elements as prescribed before. This is actually the means to get out of it. Okay, so it's not an interaction like some knowledge, so-called knowledge, accumulated knowledge that's just material knowledge about the world or whatever. It's an actual process and prescription to get out of the field of activity that the living entity is currently entrapped in. Of all the descriptions of the process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of the 10th verse. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So devotional service. So if one does not approach or is not able to approach the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. Wow, that's pretty heavy. So all these things it's like means and ways by which we can come to devotional service. People may have these particular qualities, and that's good, but if they never come to the point of being devoted to Krishna, to God, then it's just a waste of time. But if one takes to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. So this is sort of like Bhakti Yoga also has the means to get all the processes of the Ashtanga Yoga that can be achieved by surrendering to Krishna. You don't have to follow all these processes. But when one takes to devotional service, it will develop, all the good qualities will develop of a devotee of Krishna, a gentle, as I said, the brahmachari becomes gentle, a gentleman, as Bhaktivedanta, that's what it was. Bhaktivedanta Swami says is a real gentleman because of all the good qualities that develop in him. You don't have to strive for things artificially, in other words. Principles of accepting a spiritual master is accepted in the 7th verse is essential. Yes, as we've learned from the chapter 4, verse 32, just try to learn the truth by approaching the spiritual master. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Yes, you need a guide who will help guide you, the pure devotee of Krishna, the one who is taken to the process of devotional service by following in the footsteps of his spiritual master. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that the process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. So it's all in here. Anything that people try to come up with their own mind or whatever is not really true. You can't be guided down a path unless a person knows that way down the path. He cannot help guide you down that path. For those people who think that they can just create the path as they go along, they're wrong. There is a way out. As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. And so the word in this particular is amanitavam. And that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his third prayer is very famous, and one should chant the holy names of the Lord in a humble state of mind, feeling oneself to be lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others without expecting any respect in return. So that is the humility. Spiritual life and dealing with your spiritual master, it even says, humbly approach him, humbly serve him. We know that lesson from and because the devotee of Krishna, by developing all the good qualities, has the vision to understand of how sinful, looks to their own faults, in other words, as being the worst faults, doesn't judge other people about their faults or their issues, but just tries to be is just in a humble state of mind, the lower than the straw on the street, right? The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others, but from this point of view, a man in perfect knowledge who knows that he is not to this body, anything honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. So it's not really whether a person renders honor to you or doesn't render honor to you, it doesn't really matter, because they're just seeing this external dress and they're trying to judge it accordingly. So, but the devotee of Krishna knows that they're not their body, so therefore they're not very eager to receive any honor or whatnot. But that's not the civilization we live in. Everybody wants honor, and if you disrespect people, you see it all the time. Don't disrespect me. You're so, you need to respect your elders. You need to, which is, good, of course, you should respect you should respect everyone, but we not expect respect, that's what it said here. And, but everybody is eager for that, right? They're eager for that respect, and if they don't get it, then, boy, their false ego kicks in. One should not be hankering after material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for the actual advancement of spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items. So it's an interesting point. Non-violence, that's ahimsa, is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually non-violence means not to put others into distress, which is a really interesting point, because it also says in the Bhagavad Gita earlier that one should not create anxiety for others. So in our world of, we think of, let me take the example of like social media and posting political commentary on and entering into that social media aspect where you're fighting online. You say something and it's going to create, even if you have a political view and it's going to create anxiety into others, and distress to other people. Why do that? Because you're not really resolving. You just basically feel like you need the respect to be able to speak up your political view. And really what only happens is you just get people in anxiety and fighting and whatnot. So the humility allows people to walk gently in the world. People are, in general, are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So, knowing that people are in ignorance, you should try to figure out ways that you can alleviate the distress in any way that you can. But a lot of times, by saying things, actually creates more anxiety in people. So you have to kind of know when is the appropriate time to speak, and why are you actually doing that. Once again, people may, like when Bhaktivedanta was saying earlier, they want to be a mentor in the religious, because it's sort of a false ego thing, like I'm in the right religion. Look how holy I am, look how learned I am, and I will enlighten you about what your ignorance. And that can be very dangerous, because you can create people to make offenses against devotees, which is bad for them and is bad for you. So you have to walk gently with some things. Sometimes it's better to just look at it in a more indirect way of doing things, giving people prasadam, or maybe having chanting playing where they can hear it. But the actual preaching should only really be done for people who are actually interested in that. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try as one is practicing violence. That's, by creating distress in people. And also, ahimsa is also creating violence in yourself by utilizing your body in a non-Krishna conscious way to try to find happiness, and out of the fruit of activities can be considered ahimsa too, violence against your own self. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is nonviolence. So there is a fine line. Yeah, sometimes you have to speak the truth in the situation, but you have to also check to see why you're doing what you're doing exactly. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult. Tolerance. Tolerance in here is kashanti, which is interesting because it has the word peace, shanti, in there, and I don't think it's probably the same Sanskrit word. So tolerance and peace. Very interesting to say because I can tell you what my spiritual master says about tolerance too. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad, who only 5 years old was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlad tolerated him. So for making advancement in spiritual knowledge, there may be many impediments, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination, in which my spiritual master has also said true tolerance is not just being, I'm tolerating that person, he's such a but I'm just tolerating him, because I'm very holy, right? So actually tolerance is tolerating what the mind and the false ego will do in situations when you meet people. So it'll be like, that person is not respecting me, they're not respecting you, you should say something about that. Instead you just be tolerant of what goes on in your mind in reaction to when people are insulting you and whatnot. So Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one would be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of a spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility, and offer all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Yes. This is what it says in the Guru Puj prayer. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only means by which we can obtain pure devotional service. The lowest point, the lotus feet is the lowest point. It's a humble, it's where we pay our obeisances. We submit, we surrender. And that's what my spiritual master has said about, our process of surrender is like something that we go through our whole life. It's not just I surrender and then that's it. We have situations that come up where we have to surrender. We have to submit either to the will of Krishna or to the will of Maya Devi, which is Krishna's external energy as well. So either I'm going to give my life to Krishna, or I'm going to not do that. It's not like, I'm not giving my life to Maya Devi. I'm not giving, it's just my life. No, you're either giving your life to Krishna or you're giving your life to Krishna's external energy as Maya Devi, the material energy. And so in approaching the spiritual master and surrendering, my life is yours. Please let me be pleasing to you. Trying to be pleasing to Krishna, that's a form of surrender. And when you do that, then you're on the right track. You come closer to Krishna. The spiritual master gives you instructions. You hear it from the Lord in your heart very clearly what you need to do. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulative principles. Or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. So we talk about surrender. I mean, look at Arjuna. Arjuna was faced with a dilemma of one surrendering or not to fight in a massive battle of the Kurukshetra. I mean, just basically risk being beheaded by arrows and having to kill people and constantly being, whatever. We're like, should I be a vegetarian or should I give up drinking beer? Yeah, but I think I could do that. Maybe, yeah. Okay, I've got that down. So that's little surrenders. Little, or it may be very big for us, but for other people like Arjuna, he was dealing with something very large. But it is surrender, needless to say. Because of bona fide, I read that already. Okay. Or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. This is represented also in yama niyama of the Ashtanga process. So there's external. External cleanliness means taking a bath. So you got to clean your body well. Take care of your body. Eat well, clean your body, be clean, have a clean diet, don't eat a lot of junk food, that kind of thing. But internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process means this accumulated dust of past karma this process cleans the accumulated dust of the past karma from the mind. So there's an internal scrubbing, right, as well. We're chanting Krishna's names as offensively as possible. That is cleaning our heart, as Lord Chaitanya says, cleanses the dust of all the dust accumulated for life's times together. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. So we have a steady process. We're steady. We have things that we do, and we do them every day, regardless of how we feel. We have japa to do. We have to, we're, as initiated disciples or students of the spiritual master, we're instructed to at least chant 12 rounds a day, to have a solitude time in the morning where we just spend time with Krishna, do some of our rounds then. We have other expectations, chanting Krishna's names, offering our food, reading scripture, whatever it might be, but we're doing these things consistently. So it's not just like whenever I feel like it, I just don't feel like doing my japa today because I don't feel very good, I've got a headache. No, we just keep doing it. Whether it's sunny or whether it's rainy, we keep steady. That's a very practical point of view. Like if you were trying to learn a language, or you're trying to have a good body, you would be steady in your going to the gym every day, or practicing your Chinese every day, so that you're steady consistently, and that accumulation will make you better in what you're going to do, right? Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress, and self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. So there's all kinds of things Mahadevi suggests that we know, either they're under the 4 regulative principles of eating meat, fish, and eggs, or drinking alcohol, or doing drugs, or illicit sexual activity, or gambling. And so we were controlled there. We may be like, oh, somebody's giving me a bunch of lottery tickets, are gonna play, or hey, would you like to have some fish sticks? I know you really like fish, and it's got some eggs, but it's just a little bit of eggs. No, we're like, no, I've been instructed not to eat that, and so that's okay. So we practice some self-control. I'm not going to do those things. I may even want to do them, but I'm going to say no, thank you. The mind says, no, thank you. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against this path of spiritual progress. So going back to the idea of the garden analogy, when we're digging up our garden and we're planting our seeds, there may be little, sometimes weed things that birds drop and we don't just water those weeds and let them come, I'll just leave that weed there. No, we got to pull it out. Nope, there's a weed. Nope, not going to do that. Not going to let that grow. Right? We're growing our creeper of devotion to Krishna, so we have to keep focused on the things that we want to do and avoid the things that we don't want to do. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. That's true. One should not cater to these demands which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing spiritual life. So in our steadiness of progress for spiritual life, it's like, training. That's what discipline means in a disciple. Or even if you're a student, you're not formally initiated, you're still a disciple, and you're expected to act like a disciple in the sense that you're disciplined. You are been told what to do, what not to do, and just as if somebody were going to basic training and they had to do, not eat these things or not do these things, but to do all these other things, and sometimes they're very, very hard to do because you want to just have that pint of ice cream or something, but you can't really do it. So it's like we just keep our body fit so that we can serve our spiritual master nicely without being bothered in our body because we can't control our senses. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. Yes, Bhaktivedanta Swami says, not just eating, but also talking nonsense. you hear about what and what did that person do, and just nonsense stuff all the time. So we have to control our tongue as well. And so it says here, if one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate, right? In tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. Therefore, the systematic regulation, the tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of the foodstuffs offered to Krishna. We're given a very simple process. We offer our food to Krishna. We can eat that tasty food, but we don't just go, oh, yum, I'm going to eat it first and eat it. No, we think of Krishna first. We want to offer that. And then we can eat it, we can enjoy it because it's Krishna Prasadam. We can chant Krishna's names, which is a lot of fun too. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna, which is hard to do, because we have things that we have to do. So we take our opportunity. We put our pictures of Krishna around in our house. We have a picture of Krishna. I have a picture of Krishna on my phone, so every time I'm thinking, oh, Krishna, it's like I take an opportunity to Krishna. I spend my solitude morning looking at pictures of Krishna, chanting Krishna's name. So at least I've spent time when I have to step away from pictures of Krishna and have to look at people that I, work with or whatever, then at least I've done that. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, and the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service, and it is understood here that Bhagavad Gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in Bhagavad Gita but devotional service. False ego, ahankara, right, means accepting this body as oneself. That's a really important point, because what you'll see a lot of times is people saying you've got to lose ego, or kill the ego, or watch your ego, and that people don't really know what that means, because ego itself is a word that it was Greek, and it was made famous by Freud, who identified it as the self or the person, right? But not really thinking spiritual atma or whatever. They were just thinking a person, like a psychology, like the personality. That's what I want to say. So when you talk about false ego, ahankara, that is when you think that you are the body and the mind. But a jivatma is a real ego. That is a real living entity. The person is jivatma. So there is a real ego. But when we refer to ego and we say, you should check your ego, it's actually you should check your false ego. That you should check the ahankara, which is a material energy of thinking that we are the body and the mind. So there is a difference in that. So that's a good thing to check with people. People have all kinds of crazy things. They think they're very spiritually deep and whatnot, and they say things like, gotta check your ego, you'll be much happier. They don't know really what they're talking about. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, that is real ego. Ego is there. This is Bhaktivedanta Swami saying. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. So these are also people who want to just believe that they're just this one. They're impersonalists. In other words, they just think there's no ego, and we're just one energy of the universe. And once we understand that, then we'll be happy, right? So that's just cloaked impersonalism, and maybe parading under a psychology or whatever. In the Vedic literature, it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. Yeah. Because people who say that you have to kill the ego, they still refer to themselves as I or I am. And you have to be like, well, if you're not the ego, who are you? And if you're the whole universe, there is no real I then, because you're just, everyone is you, as I am you and you are me and we are one together, like the Beatles sing. So this I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. The sense of I am is ego, but when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are sense philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. So we ought to, of course, give up the false identification with the body. So that is a very clear understanding. We cannot give up our identity because our identity is who we are. And we are spiritual in essence, part and parcel of Krishna, but we are not the supreme. We are a small spark, eternally the same Jivatma. But we should give up this idea, this false identification that we are not the Jivatma, but we are our body and mind. That's the difference between what's really being said here. And it's so wonderful. It's so very clear that because when people say, just kill the ego, that just is very vague and doesn't make any sense. It makes people think, oh yeah, give up the ego, because you're a selfish bastard. One should try, you're a selfish bastard because you think you're your body and mind, that's why. One should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. Yes, we should meditate on these things. We should see the fact that people are dying all around us, the people that, even our own bodies are getting older and older, and we're having more health problems, and people come, people go, people are born, and there's suffering inherent in that. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, is suffering, etc., are very graphically described. Yes, I read this. This is in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says, oh, wonderful childhood, birth and pregnancy, and the baby is all warm in the sac of the mother's womb. And no, it's just like pretty gnarly, actually. They're like very small, and they've got these large, which were previously microscopic, but when the living entity is in the fetus, it's very small, it's cramped. It has, whatever the mother's going through, it goes through. It's got these little, parasites and whatnot biting it, and it's just growing, and it's uncomfortable. I mean, it's like being, claustrophobic for 9 months, and you're in a, and baby is very aware, the living entity is very aware of what's going on, so much so that he's praying to Krishna, please deliver me from this horrible condition. I will be your devotee, because he's very aware of his previous life and what's really going down. But then when he's getting pushed through and his skull is being crushed to a smaller thing, it's so painful, it's so stressful that he has amnesia. He comes out and he forgets who he was and the promises that he made. So this is childbirth. This is a reality. So death is suffering, birth is suffering, and life is suffering. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful, because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother. We do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Yeah, we've forgotten, and we just keep thinking, oh, it's so beautiful. Actually, it's very suffering. Because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother, we do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in authoritative scriptures. Yes. I mean, try to imagine. It's a very scary and distressful situation. And how wonderful! I mean, your body's racked with pain. You can't even breathe sometimes, and which is why it's wonderful that people can give people Krishna when they're leaving. It helps take an edge off of that. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. We should be discussing it. We should be discussing it, talking about it in life. Nobody really wants to nobody is aware of that, or nobody really wants to. They're more aware of the fact that there's suffering and there's fear around death. So much so they don't know really what to do about it. So they don't really want to talk. Let's not talk about that. Yeah, he's gonna die, but we don't want to talk about that because we don't want to put him in anxiety. It's like, well, you should be discussing. It should be discussed. You should be contemplating these things all life, being prepared for these kind of things. And as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased. No one wants to become old. But there is no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. We're not dealing with these things. We should be actually cultivating our spiritual life by preparing ourselves for this departure, but understanding that we are not our bodies and our mind. When our body is dying, it's falling apart, we're not falling apart. We've already learned that in the second chapter, that for the soul there is neither birth nor death. It's unmutable, it's unchangeable, it can't be destroyed by water or fire. The soul is brilliant, but the body is not. We do have to experience that. And so we should be discussing these things. We should be chanting Krishna's names. We should be preparing ourselves for the inevitable death that could come today. Meteor comes on, so maybe somebody gets hold of it, decides they're gonna nuke Hawaii. I don't know. Russia decides to nuke Hawaii, and we're just as it is right there. Nuclear weapons exploding around us, and then we're just vaporized. So this is all reality. Death is all around us. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada said there is death at every step. We shouldn't be like, oh, this is a wonderful world. What a wonderful world. I hear babies crying. That would be like, oh yeah, the babies are crying because they just got squeezed out of a little tube. Sorry, Louis Armstrong. It's not a wonderful world. It's not. But it can be wonderful by engaging in the process of bhakti yoga. Then it's wonderful. You'd be serving your spiritual master. Yes, that is wonderful. We understand that everything around it is not wonderful inherently, but if it's for Krishna, it's wonderful. As for detachment from children, wife, home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection, but when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada was married and he had children, and his wife was not in, his family was not really interested. They had thrown away the most amazing opportunity, because Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's father was a Vaishnava and taught him about Krishna and gave him a deity to. And so he dedicates the Bhagavad Gita to his father, also, his biological father. But Bhaktivedanta's children were not really interested in anything until later, when ISKCON was, there were temples and stuff like that, and he was selling books, and there was money that was there, and so the children were like, oh yeah, let's see if I can get in on. They weren't really interested in spiritual life before Bhaktivedanta was poor. They were they're just like, ooh, yeah, money. Ooh, great Swami, Srila Prabhupada has talked about this before. So you should try to help your family members. If they're not really interested in chanting, you can help them, but we should not be overly attached to them. They are natural objects of affection, but when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. That's why, Jesus Christ said, let the dead bury the dead. When the man came and was like, I have to bury my father. He said, no, let the dead bury the dead. He's talking about people who are not they're not really interested in spiritual life. They're dead. They're just dead spiritually. So if they would attach to the body of your father, your biological father, and they let them bury it. You have other things to deal with. The best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yeah, you can have a wonderful family life, you know. You raise your children to be Krishna conscious. You put pictures of Krishna. You listen to chanting. You offer your food to Krishna. Everything is about Krishna. Krishna is the center of the home, and we're all servants of Krishna, and we're all serving together. So we may not be perfect individually. We're definitely not perfect. We can't find our complete perfection and happiness in each other, but we can be loving in the way that we're supportive of each other and helping each other come to Krishna. Accept the remnants of foodstuffs to Krishna, have some discussions on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and engage oneself in deity worship. These 4 will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. If one can mold his family life into a way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these 4 principles, then there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. But if it is not congenial, not favorable for spiritual advancement, then family life should be abandoned. And that's what Bhaktivedanta did, because the family was just clearly not interested in. And I believe his wife sold some of his copies of his Srimad Bhagavatams or something to buy tea. some story like that, tea drinks, and it's just like one must sacrifice everything to realize or serve Krishna, just as Arjuna did. Arjuna did not want to kill his family members, but when he understood that these family members were impediments to his Krishna realization, he accepted the instruction of Krishna and fought and killed them. In all cases, one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life, because in this world, one can never be fully happy or fully miserable. Happiness and distress are concomitant factors of material life. One should learn to tolerate, as advised in Bhagavad Gita, toleration. One can never restrict the coming and going of happiness and distress. One should be detached from the materialistic way of life and automatically equiposed in both cases. So, like the seesaw that Srila Prabhupada talks about, sometimes up, sometimes down. You're not like, whoa, it's going up, dude, this is great. Oh no, it's going down. Oh, it's never gonna go up again. Oh, but it's going up again. No, you're just like, okay, if it goes up, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. Whatever. I'm not attached to that. It just happens. It'll pass one way or the other, and that's just how it is. Being equiposed. Generally, when we get something desirable, we are very happy, and when we get something undesirable, we are distressed. But if we are actually in the spiritual position, these things will not agitate us. To reach that stage, we have to practice unbreakable devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna without deviation means engaging oneself in the 9 processes of devotional service. Chanting, hearing, worshiping, offering respects, etc. As described in the last verse of the 9th chapter. That process should be followed. Naturally, when one is adapted to the spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix with materialistic men. That would go against his grain. So, things happen in this world, and I watch people get like so wrapped up in it, and they're just like reading things and just like focusing on like, oh, how terrible that person is, and just there's anger and frustration and desire to lust to control the situation. If you're focusing on Krishna, you gotta, okay, well, that kind of sucks, and I gotta figure that out, but, really, like follow my spiritual master's instructions, focus on the solution. The solution is Krishna. I have to do things for Krishna, and this will resolve itself. I don't have to like spend all my energy. And people spend all their energy, and they get so tired and depressed because they can't resolve this materialistic thing that's happening. They're distressed, or they're like, wow, this is so great, like this is happening in my life, and they'll just get sidetracked and they're just trying to hold on and squeeze out. You just got to squeeze out the happiness of this really exciting point, but oh no, the seesaw's going down again. It's just like, if you're serving Krishna, even if you're chanting Krishna's names, there's more important things to be doing, and you'll find that you can tolerate, especially if you're doing your Srila Prabhupada is instructed for us to have solitude time every day in the morning, doing our japa, looking at videos of Krishna's pictures, chanting Krishna's names, not being disturbed by anyone else, but having that solitude time. If you do that, he said that you can accomplish anything in your life that you need to deal with. You will have no problem dealing with those. You will clear the hurdles. So take your time, use your time wisely. Don't, as the Charidas would say, that you should follow the serenity prayer, Lord. Okay, I have to look that up again now. So give me the strength to accept the things I cannot change and change the things I can, basically is what it is. And so that's what we have to do. Naturally, when one is adapted to the spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix with materialistic men. That would go against its grain. One may test himself by seeing how far he is inclined to live in a solitary place without unwanted association. Naturally, a devotee has no taste for unnecessary sporting or cinema going or enjoying some social function, because he understands that these are simply a waste of time. There are many research scholars and philosophers who study sex life or some other subject, but according to Bhagavad Gita, such research work and philosophical speculation have no value. That is more or less nonsensical. According to Bhagavad Gita, one should make research by philosophical discretion into the nature of the soul. One should make research to understand with what the self is concerned. That is recommended here. So sometimes people are specialized in particular fields and whatnot, and but they can see it in perspective of like what people would say the nature of reality is. And so you are aware of that, you're familiar, you've researched it, but not in a sense of trying to find the absolute truth. You already know the absolute truth. So the most important understanding is to study the Bhagavad Gita, study the Srimad Bhagavatam, study the absolute truth, and follow the processes laid out by your spiritual master to acquire that truth. Because then Krishna provides you with all the knowledge, even if you're not a Gyani and all these things in the materialistic realm. You will understand things prospectively of how you need to do, how you need to go. As far as self-realization is concerned, it is clearly stated here that Bhakti Yoga is especially practical. As soon as there is a question of devotion, one must consider the relationship between the supersoul and the individual soul. The individual soul and the supersoul cannot be one, because you cannot have a relationship with yourself. I saw this, I actually see, these are things that I do see and I can relate them, but it was Shambhala, I think it's a new agey book thing, and the guy was this self-proclaimed guru, and he was like, you have to, with all passion, make love to yourself. It's like, how do you do that? That's like, I was like, well, I kind of get what he's trying to say, like you got to love yourself, but which doesn't actually really make any sense, because then I would say, who are you and who is the self that you're in love with? And, all I could think of was when you make love to yourself is some kind of weird contortion like that. So it was like, how do you do that? And who are you? So this whole idea, the idea of self-love, as we know from Acharya Das, has come about from the 70s pop psychology, which has come up with the self-love craze. But here, Bhaktivedanta Swami's Prabhupada said is that the individual soul and the super soul are two distinct, and they have a relationship. It's not that they're the same. The individual and the soul, super soul cannot be one. Without being two, you can be one in will, like Jesus Christ was saying. You one in will with my Father, But you can't be the same person because you can't have a relationship in that way. At least not in the bhakti conception, the devotional concept of life. The service of the individual soul to the super soul is eternal, nityam, as is clearly stated. So bhakti or devotional service is eternal. One should be established in that philosophical conviction, otherwise it is only a waste of time, ignorance. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is explained. Vedanti tat tatvad vidash tatvam yaj Gnanam Advayam. Those who are actual knowers of the absolute truth know that the self is realized in three different phases as Brahman, Paramama, and Bhagavan. Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, 11th verse. Bhagavan is the last word in the realization of the absolute truth. Therefore, one should reach up to that platform of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus engage in the devotional service of the Lord. That is perfection of knowledge. Beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the supreme truth, the absolute personality of Godhead, this process is just like a staircase beginning from the ground floor up to the top floor. Now on the staircase there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second floor, or third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is harmful. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks I am God. Right? It's just like you're God, but you have to go to the bathroom, you get sick, you get colds, you die, your body dies, you have to stop at stop signs, you have to eat, you can't, when you have to go to the bathroom, you have to go to the bathroom, you have no control over that, and you're God? I mean, it's like, one should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. So that was pretty amazing. That's an amazing 8 through 12, chapter 13, the verses. And you can meditate upon those different aspects of knowledge and reflect upon them. It's really very clearly delineated by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And that will be all for today. Thank you. Namaste.